My son-in-law tried to drug me and rob my safe, but he walked into a trap that left him glitter-covered and exposed in front of my daughter. The moment I saw my son-in-law's eyes light up when he asked about my safe, I knew something was wrong. But when he tried to drug my whiskey and rob me blind, he had no idea what kind of trap he was walking into. What happened next will shock you. And by the end of this story, you'll understand why sometimes the best revenge is watching someone destroy themselves with their own greed. Before we dive in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this unfolds. 3 weeks ago, my daughter Sarah called me in tears. Her voice was shaking as she explained that her husband Marcus had lost his job and they were facing foreclosure. As a father, hearing your child in distress tears your heart apart. Without hesitation, I told them they could stay with me until they got back on their feet. What I didn't realize was that I had just invited a predator into my home. Marcus arrived at my house with designer luggage and an expensive watch, which seemed odd for someone claiming financial hardship. But I pushed those doubts aside. Sarah needed help, and that's all that mattered to me. During their first week, I tried to make them comfortable, clearing out space and adjusting my routines to accommodate 3 people instead of 1. That's when Marcus started asking questions. At first, they seemed innocent enough. He wanted to know about the neighborhood watch schedule, which neighbors were home during the day, my banking habits, whether I kept cash in the house. I told myself he was just trying to get familiar with the area, maybe looking out for our security. But something about the way he asked these questions felt calculated, like he was gathering intelligence rather than making conversation. The red flags started piling up quickly. Marcus would disappear for long phone calls, always stepping outside or into another room. When I asked about these calls, he claimed they were potential employers or networking contacts. But I noticed how his mood would shift afterward, the tension in his shoulders, the way he'd pace around the house like a caged animal. Then, there was the mail situation. Financial statements and collection notices started arriving at my address with Marcus's name on them. Credit card companies, collection agencies, final demand letters. When I mentioned these to Sarah, she looked genuinely confused. Marcus had told her he was handling all their finances while job hunting. She had no idea about any debts. But the most disturbing moment came during a family dinner, 2 weeks into their stay. We were eating quietly when Marcus suddenly looked up and asked about my safe upstairs. The question came out of nowhere, cutting through our peaceful conversation like a knife. "What kind of lock does it have?" he asked, his eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that made my chest tighten. Sarah nearly choked on her water. "Marcus, what kind of question is that?" But Marcus kept staring at me, waiting for an answer. There was something predatory in his expression that I'd never seen before. He tried to cover it up with talk about home security and break-ins in the area, but I'd lived in this neighborhood for 15 years. The most excitement we'd had was Mrs. Patterson's cat getting stuck in a tree. That's when I knew Marcus wasn't here because of unemployment. He was here because of opportunity. Over the following days, I started paying closer attention to his behavior. He would casually ask about my insurance policies, my bank locations, my daily routines. He wanted to know if I was a heavy sleeper, whether I took any medications, how often I checked on things upstairs. Each question felt like fingers probing for weakness, testing my defenses. The breakthrough came when I caught him in my bedroom. I had gone downstairs to make coffee one morning when I realized I'd forgotten my reading glasses. As I climbed back up the stairs, I noticed my bedroom door was slightly open. I always keep it closed, a habit from 40 years of living alone. There was no reason for anyone to be in there. I pushed the door open quietly and found Marcus standing by my dresser. He spun around when he heard me, his face flushing red with what looked like guilt and panic. "Oh, hey, David," he stammered. "I was looking for aspirin. Sarah said you might have some in your bathroom cabinet." But the bathroom was in the opposite direction, and my medicine cabinet had been clearly visible from the hallway. More importantly, I could see that my dresser drawers weren't quite flush anymore. Someone had been searching through them. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I stayed awake, listening. Around midnight, I heard footsteps moving carefully through the house. They weren't Sarah's light steps, they were heavier, more deliberate. The sounds moved toward the front of the house, then I heard Marcus's voice, barely above a whisper. He was making a phone call. I crept closer to the heating vent that connected my bedroom to the living room below. Sometimes sound traveled through the old ductwork in unexpected ways, and that night I could hear every word clearly. "Yeah, it's me," Marcus whispered. "Everyone's asleep. The old man's definitely loaded. I found bank statements, investment portfolios, the whole thing. We're talking serious money here." My blood went cold. He wasn't talking to a potential employer. He was talking to an accomplice. "I already scoped out his routine," Marcus continued. "Tomorrow night, Sarah's going to her book club meeting. She goes every Tuesday, 7 to 9. Gives us the perfect window." I grabbed my phone and started recording, my hands shaking with a mixture of rage and determination. Whatever came next, I needed evidence. "I found where he keeps the safe key," Marcus said, his voice gaining confidence. "Hidden in his bedroom dresser, taped under the drawer. The old fool probably thinks it's the safest place in the world." The casual cruelty in his voice was breathtaking. This man was sitting in my house, eating my food, accepted into my family, while planning to rob me blind. "Look, I know you're worried about the timeline," Marcus continued, "but my gambling debts aren't going away. Those guys aren't exactly patient, if you know what I mean. This has to happen now." Gambling debts. That explained everything. The desperation, the calculated approach, the willingness to betray his wife's family. Marcus wasn't just an opportunistic thief. He was a desperate man backed into a corner by his own stupidity. "David's just some lonely old man," Marcus said with a sneer. "Probably grateful for the company. He has no idea what's coming. Hell, he was practically giving me a tour of his security setup at dinner tonight." The conversation continued for several more minutes, with Marcus outlining his plan in detail. He would wait until Sarah left for book club, then claim he was having stomach problems and needed to lie down. Once I was asleep, he'd use the key from my dresser to open the safe and clean out whatever cash and valuables he could find. "By Thursday, we'll be gone," he concluded. "I'll tell Sarah we got a job offer in another state, something urgent. We'll disappear before the old man knows what hit him." When the call finally ended, I sat in the darkness of my bedroom, processing what I'd heard. Marcus had an accomplice, serious gambling debts, and a detailed plan to rob me tomorrow night. But more than that, he was planning to drag my daughter into his web of deception, using her trust and love as cover for his crimes. The violation went deeper than theft. This was personal, intimate. Someone had been studying my routines, cataloging my possessions, planning to destroy the security I'd spent decades building. But Marcus had made one critical mistake. He'd assumed I was helpless. For 30 years before retirement, I'd worked as an insurance investigator. I'd dealt with plenty of desperate people who thought they were smarter than everyone else. I knew how their minds worked, how they justified their crimes, and most importantly, how they always got caught. Marcus wanted to play games with an old man. Fine, but he was about to learn that some old men know how to fight back. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to every small sound in the house, a plan began forming in my mind. Marcus expected to find a helpless victim tomorrow night. Instead, he was going to walk into a trap that would expose him for exactly what he was. The next morning, I went about my normal routine, making breakfast and chatting pleasantly with Sarah and Marcus as if nothing had changed. But internally, I was already several moves ahead, preparing for a confrontation that would determine not just my safety, but my daughter's future. Marcus thought he was hunting prey. He had no idea he'd become the hunted. The first thing I did that Tuesday morning was visit my local hardware store. I needed supplies for what I was planning, but more importantly, I needed to think through every detail of Marcus's scheme. He'd made his intentions crystal clear in that midnight phone call. Tonight, while Sarah was at book club, he planned to drug me, steal my safe key, and clean out everything I'd worked 40 years to accumulate. But Marcus had overlooked one crucial detail. The key wasn't where he thought it was anymore. At 5 that morning, after lying awake replaying his conversation, I'd moved the brass key from my dresser drawer to my kitchen junk drawer, buried beneath rubber bands and twist ties. Marcus could tear apart my bedroom all he wanted. He'd find nothing but disappointment. In the hardware store, I found exactly what I needed in their party supply section. A small confetti cannon, the kind used for gender reveals and celebrations. Spring-loaded, designed to create maximum surprise with minimum effort. I also picked up a bag of ultra-fine glitter in silver and gold. If Marcus wanted to play thief, he should look the part. The beauty of my plan wasn't just catching him in the act. It was making sure he couldn't deny what he'd done, couldn't spin another lie to manipulate Sarah's trust. Physical evidence that would cling to him like guilt made visible. Back home, I found Sarah packing her purse for book club while Marcus lounged on my couch, scrolling through his phone with the casual confidence of a man who thought he had everything figured out. "Have a wonderful time tonight, sweetheart," I told Sarah, kissing her cheek. "Don't worry about rushing home. Take all the time you need." Marcus looked up sharply. "You're not going anywhere tonight, are you, David?" I shook my head, playing the part of the oblivious grandfather. "Just planning a quiet evening at home. Might turn in early, actually. I've been feeling more tired than usual lately." The relief that flickered across Marcus's face was almost comical. Everything was falling into place perfectly for his robbery. What he didn't know was that it was falling into place for my trap. After Sarah left at 6:30, Marcus immediately shifted into preparation mode. He started asking casual questions about my evening routine, whether I'd be taking any medication to help me sleep, how soundly I usually rested. Each question was designed to gauge how unconscious I'd be when he made his move. "You know," he said around 8 o'clock, "I've been thinking we should share a drink tonight. Father and son-in-law bonding time." The suggestion came out of nowhere, but I recognized it immediately. This was how he planned to ensure I'd sleep deeply enough for his theft to go undetected. That's thoughtful," I replied, "but I'm on blood pressure medication that doesn't mix well with alcohol." Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. "Come on, one small glass won't hurt, we're family now." The persistence was telling. A normal person would have accepted my refusal gracefully. Marcus was pushing because he needed me to consume something specific, something that would guarantee I'd be unconscious during his crime. "I'll pour us both a glass of that nice whiskey I saw in your cabinet," he continued, already heading toward the kitchen. "Just a small toast to celebrate our time together." He disappeared before I could object. I heard cabinet doors opening, the clink of glass, then silence that stretched too long. When he returned, he carried 2 tumblers, one with amber liquid, one with slightly less. "Changed my mind about you drinking," he said with a practiced smile. "Poured you just a tiny splash for the toast, barely a teaspoon." He held out the second glass, and I noticed his hand trembled slightly. The whiskey inside caught the lamplight, looking innocent enough. But after 30 years investigating insurance fraud, I knew what desperation looked like. I knew how people behaved when they thought they were being clever. "Marcus, I really can't," I said firmly. "One tiny sip," he insisted, "for family." The word family coming from his mouth after what I'd heard him say about me made my stomach turn. But I maintained my composure, standing slowly from my chair. "You know what? I think I'll take one of those sleeping pills my doctor prescribed and call it a night early." Marcus's entire posture changed. "Sleeping pills?" "Doctor gave them to me last month," I explained, watching his reaction carefully. "Powerful stuff. Knocks me out completely until morning. I'll be dead to the world." The relief that washed over his face was unmistakable. His drug plan had just become unnecessary. The old fool was going to sedate himself. "That sounds perfect," he said quickly. "You need your rest." I made a show of climbing the stairs slowly, pausing to grip the banister like an elderly man struggling with fatigue. At the top, I called down, "Don't wait up for me. I'll probably sleep straight through until morning." "Sleep well, David," Marcus replied, and I could hear the anticipation in his voice. In my bedroom, I went through the motions of preparing for sleep, but I was actually setting the final elements of my trap. The confetti cannon went into my dresser drawer, positioned so it would trigger when someone reached toward the back where the key used to be hidden. The mechanism was beautifully simple, spring-loaded to activate under pressure. I also placed a dummy key near the front of the drawer, an old luggage key that looked similar enough to fool someone searching in darkness. Marcus would spot it immediately, reach for it confidently, and trigger my surprise. Next came the camera. I'd purchased a small wireless security camera that connected to my smartphone, compact enough to hide between books on my nightstand. The night vision was crystal clear, and it would capture everything from the moment Marcus entered my room until he left covered in glitter and shame. By 10:30, everything was ready. I turned off my bedroom light and settled onto my bed, fully clothed and wide awake. Through my slightly open door, I could see the hallway and hear Marcus moving around downstairs, waiting, calculating, preparing for what he thought would be the perfect crime. At 11:15, the house went completely quiet. Marcus was giving my supposed sleeping pill time to take full effect. The silence stretched on, broken only by the old house settling and my own controlled breathing. Then, at 12:43, I heard the first creak on the stairs. Marcus moved like a professional burglar, avoiding the spots that groaned under weight. He'd learned my house's quirks during his 3-week stay, mapping every sound that might betray his presence. The hallway floorboard outside my room whispered under his feet. Then silence. He was listening, making sure his sleeping pill story had worked its magic. My door handle turned with glacial slowness. Marcus's silhouette appeared in the doorway, backlit by the faint hallway light. He stood frozen for 30 seconds, watching my supposedly unconscious form. Satisfied that I was deeply sedated, he slipped inside. Through barely cracked eyelids, I watched him approach my dresser with predatory confidence. This was it. 3 weeks of planning, manipulation, and betrayal were about to culminate in spectacular failure. Marcus positioned himself directly in front of the dresser. His hands reached for the second drawer, the one he believed contained the key to my safe and his financial salvation. The drawer slid open smoothly. For a split second, I saw triumph in his posture. He'd found his target, spotted the dummy key I'd planted as bait. His fingers reached inside confidently, seeking the brass solution to all his gambling problems. Then my confetti bomb exploded. The sound was magnificent, like a party favor crossed with a small cannon. Silver and gold glitter erupted in a glorious cloud, coating Marcus from head to toe in sparkling evidence of his crime. The explosion echoed through the house like celebratory gunfire. Marcus stumbled backward, cursing violently as glitter settled in his hair, on his clothes, across his shocked face. He looked like he'd been attacked by a craft store, transformed into a walking disco ball of guilt and humiliation. "What the hell?" he gasped, frantically brushing at the glitter that clung to everything like metallic guilt. I sat up in bed with theatrical confusion, reaching for my lamp. "What on earth was that noise?" Light flooded the room, revealing Marcus in all his sparkling glory. He stood frozen beside my dresser, covered head to toe in festive confetti, holding my dummy key like evidence of his failed theft. "Marcus?" I blinked with apparent bewilderment. "What are you doing in my bedroom? And why are you covered in glitter?" The trap was complete. The predator had become prey, marked as clearly as if he'd been dipped in paint. And the best part was yet to come, because I could hear footsteps in the hallway. Sarah was coming to investigate the explosion that had just destroyed her marriage and exposed her husband's true nature. The sound of Sarah's footsteps rushing down the hallway filled me with both relief and heartbreak. Relief because my plan had worked perfectly, and heartbreak because I was about to watch my daughter's world collapse. But she deserved to know the truth about the man she'd married, no matter how painful it would be. "Dad, what happened? Are you okay?" Sarah's voice carried panic and worry as she appeared in the doorway, tying her robe with quick, anxious movements. Then she stopped dead in her tracks. Her eyes took in the scene before her. Me sitting up in bed, apparently confused and concerned. Marcus standing beside my open dresser drawer like a Christmas ornament gone wrong, covered from head to toe in glittering evidence of his betrayal. "What in the world?" Sarah's voice caught in her throat. "Marcus, why are you in Dad's bedroom? And why do you look like you've been dipped in a craft store?" Marcus opened and closed his mouth like a fish gasping for air. More glitter cascaded from his hair with each movement, settling on my carpet like festive snow, marking the spot where his lies had finally caught up with him. "There was a noise," he said weakly, his voice strained with desperation. "I came to check on your father." "At 1 in the morning?" Sarah's tone sharpened in a way I'd never heard before. There was steel beneath her confusion now, protective instincts kicking in. "And you ended up covered in what is that exactly? Glitter?" "Some kind of security device," Marcus said quickly, brushing frantically at his sparkling clothes. "It went off when I opened the drawer." Sarah's eyes moved from Marcus to the open dresser drawer, then to me. The pieces weren't adding up, and I could see her analytical mind working through the inconsistencies. "Dad, do you have security devices in your furniture?" I maintained my expression of elderly bewilderment. "Not that I know of, sweetheart. I was sound asleep until that explosion woke me up." The silence that followed felt heavy with implications. Sarah looked between us, her expression shifting from confusion to something harder, more suspicious. Then why were you in his dresser drawer, Marcus? Her voice carried an edge I'd never heard before, protective and dangerous. Marcus's story began crumbling in real time. I was looking for something to help you sleep. You were tossing and turning, and I thought David might have some extra sleep medication. Sleep aids? Sarah's eyebrows rose. In his bedroom dresser at 1 a.m? I thought maybe he kept them there. Marcus gestured weakly at the drawer, sending more glitter cascading to the floor like evidence raining from the sky. Marcus, I said gently, playing my part perfectly. My medications are in the bathroom cabinet. They always have been. The weight of that statement hung in the air like an accusation. Sarah looked between us again, and I could see the exact moment when doubt transformed into something much more dangerous. Understanding. So let me get this straight, she said slowly, her voice dropping to a controlled whisper that somehow felt more threatening than shouting. You left our bed at 1 a.m, came into my father's bedroom while he was sleeping, and opened his private dresser drawer looking for medicine you knew wasn't there. It's not like that, Marcus said desperately, but his voice lacked conviction. The glitter covering him made every word seem ridiculous, like a failed magician trying to explain away a botched trick. Then what is it like? Sarah stepped closer to him, and I felt a surge of pride watching my daughter stand her ground. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like my husband was going through my father's personal belongings in the middle of the night. Marcus's desperation grew more visible by the second. Sarah, you have to understand. I was trying to help. Help with what exactly? I interjected mildly, knowing the question would force him deeper into his web of lies. I was confused, disoriented, he stammered. I thought I heard someone breaking in. Breaking in, Sarah repeated flatly. So you decided to search my father's bedroom furniture? I wasn't searching anything. Then what do you call opening his dresser drawer? The defensive anger creeping into Marcus's voice seemed to hit Sarah like a slap. She took a step back, and I saw something fundamental shift in her expression. Why are you interrogating me like this? Marcus snapped. I'm your husband. You're right, Sarah said quietly, her voice deadly calm. You are my husband, which is exactly why I'm asking you to explain why you're standing in my father's bedroom at 1 a.m, covered in craft supplies, with your hand in his private drawer. Marcus looked trapped, cornered by the weight of his own implausible explanations. Glitter continued to fall from his clothes, like evidence of his guilt made visible. I can explain everything, he said desperately. Then please do, Sarah crossed her arms, because right now I'm very confused about what my husband was doing in here. I watched my daughter's face and saw the exact moment her protective instincts shifted from Marcus to me. The moment she began to see the situation not as a misunderstanding, but as a threat to her father. Marcus must have sensed it too, because panic crept into his voice. Sarah, you have to trust me. But trust, once broken by glitter and lies, isn't easily repaired. Sarah's eyes stayed fixed on Marcus, and I could see her processing, analyzing, drawing conclusions her heart didn't want to accept. Marcus, she said slowly, I need you to tell me the truth right now. What were you really doing in my father's bedroom? The moment had come. My daughter deserved better than watching her husband spin more elaborate lies. She deserved the truth, no matter how much it would hurt. Sarah, I said gently, reaching for my phone on the nightstand. There's something you need to hear. Marcus's face went white beneath the glitter. David, don't what? Sarah's voice sharpened dangerously. Don't what, Marcus? I found the recording from the previous night and held up my phone. Sweetheart, I recorded something last night. A phone conversation. I think you should listen to it. No, Marcus said quickly, desperation making his voice crack. Sarah, whatever he thinks he heard... Be quiet, Sarah snapped, never taking her eyes off me. Dad, play it. I pressed play, and Marcus's voice filled the room, clear and damning. Yeah, it's me. Everyone's asleep. The old man's definitely loaded. I found bank statements, investment portfolios, the whole thing. We're talking serious money here. Sarah's face went completely still. Her eyes widened as she listened to her husband's voice discussing my finances with a stranger, like I was nothing more than a target to be exploited. Tomorrow night, Sarah's going to her book club meeting. She goes every Tuesday, 7 to 9. Gives us perfect timing. Stop it, Marcus said desperately. Sarah, I can explain this. Shut up. Sarah's voice was deadly quiet. Just shut up and let me listen. The recording continued, Marcus's voice growing more confident as he outlined his plan. I already have the safe key. Grabbed it earlier today while they were having dinner. The old fool keeps everything important in there. Cash, jewelry, probably more bank information. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. She stared at Marcus like she was seeing a complete stranger. Lam? Look, I know you're worried about the timeline, but my gambling debts aren't going away. Those guys aren't exactly patient, if you know what I mean. Gambling debts? Sarah whispered, her voice breaking. What gambling debts? The recording played on, each word another nail in the coffin of their marriage. David's just some lonely old man, probably grateful for the company. He has no idea what's coming. Hell, he was practically giving me a tour of his security setup at dinner tonight. I watched my daughter's face crumble as she heard her husband's casual dismissal of me, his cold assessment of my vulnerability, his calculated plan to exploit my kindness and her trust. The beauty is, he'll never suspect family. Even if he figures out something's missing, Sarah will convince him he just misplaced stuff. You know how old people get about their memory. Sarah made a sound like she'd been physically struck, her husband's voice discussing how to use her love and trust to cover his theft, how to manipulate her into gaslighting her own father. Trust me, by Thursday, we'll be clear. I'll tell Sarah we got a job offer in another state, something urgent. We'll be gone before the old man knows what hit him. I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of glitter still occasionally dropping from Marcus's clothes. Sarah stared at her husband, tears streaming down her face. Gambling debts? She whispered. You were going to rob my father? Sarah, listen to me. Marcus tried to step toward her, but she backed away like he was dangerous. You called him a lonely old fool. Her voice cracked with pain and rage. You were going to steal from him and then disappear, taking me with you as your cover story. Marcus tried once more. We can work this out. It's not as bad as it sounds. How much? She demanded, cutting through his excuses. What? How much do you owe? Marcus's shoulders sagged in defeat. 47,000. Sarah's legs seemed to give out. She sank against the doorframe, staring at the man she'd married with complete horror and disbelief. You've been lying to me for months, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. About everything. The job loss, our finances, why we really needed to stay here. I was trying to protect you. By planning to rob my father? Sarah's voice rose to a shout that echoed through the house. By using me as your alibi while you destroyed the man who raised me? The transformation in my daughter was remarkable. The confused, hurt woman from moments before had been replaced by someone I barely recognized. Someone fierce and protective and absolutely done with being manipulated. Get out, she said, her voice carrying the weight of finality. Sarah, get out of my father's house now. For the first time since I'd known him, Marcus had nothing to say. No smooth explanation, no manipulative twist, no way to spin this situation in his favor. He stood there, covered in glitter like a failed party favor, watching his marriage and his criminal plan crumble simultaneously. The silence stretched between them, heavy with the weight of betrayal and broken trust. Outside, the night was still and quiet, but inside my bedroom, everything had changed forever. Marcus stood there for another long moment, glitter still cascading from his hair like tarnished snow. The weight of his exposed lies seemed to press down on him, making him appear smaller somehow. Finally, something in Sarah's expression, that pure, protective fury I'd seen ignite in her eyes, convinced him that his marriage was truly over. This isn't finished, he said, his voice turning ugly as desperation gave way to spite. Half of everything we own is legally mine. I'll get my share in court. Sarah's laugh was cold and bitter. You mean half of our debt? Because that's all we have, Marcus. Debt. $47,000 of gambling debt that I knew absolutely nothing about. I'll fight you, Marcus threatened, but even he seemed to realize how hollow it sounded. I'll drag this through every court in the state. With what money? Sarah stepped closer to him, and I felt a surge of pride watching her refuse to be intimidated. You just admitted you owe dangerous people nearly $50,000. What exactly are you planning to fight me with? Marcus's bravado crumbled like wet cardboard. He looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw something approaching genuine hatred in his eyes. "This is your fault, old man," he snarled. "You turned her against me. You manipulated this whole situation." "No," Sarah said firmly, positioning herself between Marcus and me. "You did that yourself. When you decided to plan a robbery instead of asking for help, when you called my father names behind his back, when you lied to me for months about everything that mattered." Marcus tried one last desperate approach, his voice cracking with fake emotion. "Sarah, we're married. We took vows. For better or worse, remember?" "You broke those vows," Sarah replied without hesitation, "the moment you decided to commit a felony against my family. The moment you planned to use my trust to cover up your theft." She pointed toward the door with steady determination. "Get your things and get out, now, tonight." I watched Marcus realize that his con was truly over. No more manipulation, no more lies, no more playing the victim. Sarah had heard his own words condemn him, recorded in his own voice. There was no spinning this, no explaining it away. He left the room without another word, tracking glitter through my house like a trail of evidence. We could hear him in the guest room, throwing clothes into bags with bitter violence, drawers slamming, hangers clattering, the sounds of a man whose carefully constructed world had collapsed in spectacular fashion. Sarah sank into my bedside chair, looking utterly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the confrontation was fading, leaving behind the raw pain of betrayal. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she whispered, tears flowing freely now. "I brought him into your home. I put you in danger because I was too blind to see what he really was." "Sweetheart," I said gently, "you couldn't have known. Marcus is a skilled manipulator. He fooled you because you loved him, and love makes us want to trust." "But I should have seen the signs," she insisted. "The phone calls he wouldn't explain, the way he asked you so many questions about your finances, how he seemed to know more about our debt situation than he was telling me." I reached over and took her hand. "You saw what he wanted you to see. That's how con artists operate. They're experts at showing people exactly what they expect while hiding their true intentions." Sarah looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "How long have you known?" "Since 2 nights ago when I heard that phone call. But I suspected something was wrong from almost the beginning. His questions were too specific, too focused on things that shouldn't matter to someone just trying to get familiar with the neighborhood." She managed a weak smile through her tears. "The glitter bomb was brilliant, Dad. Absolutely brilliant. I wanted him caught red-handed," I explained. "Or should I say, glitter-handed. I needed evidence that even he couldn't deny or explain away." That earned me a genuine laugh, even through her tears. He looked like a disco ball that had been through a blender. Marcus reappeared in the doorway with 2 hastily packed bags, still sparkling like some kind of defeated party decoration. His earlier bravado had completely evaporated, replaced by sullen resignation. "Sarah, just remember," he said, making one final attempt at manipulation, "I'm the one who's been supporting us. Without me, you'll have nothing." "Without you," Sarah replied calmly, "I'll have my self-respect back. And I'll have my father, who actually knows what family loyalty means." She stood up and walked to her purse, pulling out her keys. "Leave your house key on the kitchen counter. Don't contact me directly. Any communication goes through lawyers from now on." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to realize the futility. The glitter covering him made any attempt at dignity impossible. He looked ridiculous and pathetic, exactly what he deserved. "This isn't over, Sarah," he said as he headed for the door. "You'll regret this decision." "The only thing I regret," Sarah called after him, "is not seeing through your lies sooner." We heard his footsteps on the stairs, then the front door opening and closing with finality. A minute later, his car started and pulled out of the driveway, carrying Marcus and his gambling debts away from our lives forever. Sarah and I sat in silence for several minutes, processing what had just happened. The house felt different already, cleaner somehow, like a weight had been lifted from the very walls. "Can I stay here?" Sarah asked quietly. "Just until I figure out what comes next?" "Sweetheart," I said, pulling her into a hug. "This is your home for as long as you want it. It always has been." She cried then, really cried, letting out months of stress and confusion and betrayal. I held her like I had when she was little and had scraped her knee or been hurt by cruel classmates. Some things never change between a father and daughter, no matter how old they get. "I feel so stupid," she whispered against my shoulder. "How did I not see what he was doing? How did I not know about the gambling, the debts, any of it?" Because you trusted the person you married, I said simply. That's not stupidity. That's love. Marcus abused that trust, but that doesn't make you foolish for having it in the first place. As dawn approached, we finally made our way downstairs to the kitchen. I started a pot of coffee while Sarah called in sick to work, explaining she had a family emergency to deal with, which wasn't really a lie. What happens now? She asked, wrapping her hands around her coffee mug like it was an anchor. Now you rebuild, I said. You file for divorce. You figure out what debts are actually yours versus his, and you start over. It won't be easy, but you're stronger than you think. Sarah nodded slowly, processing the magnitude of the changes ahead of her. Will you help me find a good lawyer? Already making calls, I assured her. I know someone who specializes in cases like this. She'll make sure Marcus doesn't drag you down with his gambling debts. We spent the rest of that morning making lists and plans, accounts to freeze, documents to gather, people to notify. The practical business of untangling a life from someone who'd been systematically deceiving you. But there was something else we needed to address. Dad, Sarah said during a quiet moment, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Always. How much danger were you really in? If your trap hadn't worked, if Marcus had actually gotten into that safe, what would have happened? I considered the question carefully. Sarah deserved the complete truth, not a sugar-coated version designed to spare her feelings. Honestly, I think Marcus was desperate enough to do whatever it took to get that money. $47,000 in gambling debts to dangerous people, that's not something you walk away from. And once he'd robbed me, he couldn't risk me identifying him later. Sarah's face went pale. You think he would have hurt you? I think desperate people make desperate choices, I said gently. And Marcus had already shown he was willing to betray the people who trusted him most. It's not a big leap from theft to violence when someone's backed into a corner. The weight of that realization settled over both of us. Marcus hadn't just been planning a simple robbery. He'd been preparing to destroy our family in whatever way necessary to save himself. Thank God for your insurance investigator instincts, Sarah said shakily, and your glitter bomb. Thank God you came home when you did, I countered. Even the best trap is useless if no one witnesses it. 3 weeks later, I was reading the morning paper when Sarah came downstairs, dressed for her job interview at the local library. She'd been staying with me while the divorce proceeded, and slowly, I was watching my daughter rediscover who she was without Marcus's manipulation and lies. How are you feeling about today? I asked, setting down the sports section. Nervous, but good nervous, she replied, pouring herself coffee with steady hands. It's been so long since I've had to think about what I actually want to do with my life, instead of just managing Marcus's latest crisis. The transformation in Sarah over the past few weeks had been remarkable. The stressed, anxious woman who'd called me in tears about foreclosure had been replaced by someone stronger, more confident. Someone who'd learned she could survive betrayal and come out better on the other side. Any word from the lawyer about the divorce proceedings? I asked. She says it should be finalized within another month. Marcus isn't contesting anything, probably because he knows fighting would just expose more of his financial crimes. Sarah smiled grimly. Turns out when you're facing potential criminal charges for fraud and theft, you don't want to draw extra attention to yourself in court. I nodded, satisfied that justice was taking its course. Marcus had discovered that actions have consequences, even when you think you're too clever to get caught. Dad, Sarah said, settling at the kitchen table with her coffee, I want you to know how grateful I am, not just for protecting me from Marcus, but for showing me what real strength looks like. What do you mean? You could have confronted him directly, could have thrown him out the moment you suspected something. Instead, you were patient and strategic. You gathered evidence, set up a situation where the truth couldn't be denied, and you did it all while protecting me from having to choose sides. She paused, looking out the kitchen window at the garden where spring flowers were beginning to bloom. Most importantly, you showed me that I don't have to accept being treated badly just because someone claims to love me. That real love doesn't come with conditions or threats or manipulation. Those words meant more to me than Sarah could possibly know. For 30 years as an insurance investigator, I'd seen what happened when people preyed on others' trust and kindness. I'd watched families destroyed by greed and deception. But I'd also learned that sometimes The best way to fight back isn't with violence or anger. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply letting people reveal their true nature. You know what the most satisfying part was? I asked Sarah. What? Marcus thought he was so smart, so careful in his planning. He studied my routines, mapped out my house, identified my vulnerabilities. But he made one critical error. Which was? I smiled, remembering the look of absolute shock on Marcus's face when that glitter bomb exploded. He assumed that being old meant being helpless. He thought retirement made me soft, that living alone made me an easy target. He saw a lonely widower and thought he'd found the perfect victim. Sarah laughed, the first genuinely happy sound I'd heard from her in months. Boy, was he wrong about that. The funny thing is, if Marcus had just been honest from the beginning, if he'd come to me and explained about his gambling debts and asked for help, I probably would have helped him. Not $47,000, but something to get him started on the right path. Really? Sarah looked surprised. Family helps family when they ask honestly and work to deserve that help. But Marcus didn't want help. He wanted to take what wasn't his and disappear without consequences. That's not family. That's just theft with extra steps. Sarah finished her coffee and gathered her purse and car keys for the interview. At the door, she turned back to me. I love you, Dad. Thank you for being exactly the father I needed, especially when I didn't realize how much I needed you. After she left, I sat in my quiet kitchen, surrounded by the peace of a home that was finally secure again. No more lies, no more hidden agendas, no more predators disguised as family. My phone buzzed with a text from my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. Heard through the grapevine about your innovative home security system. Any chance you could help me install something similar? I've got some expensive jewelry that needs protecting. I laughed out loud. Word was apparently spreading about my unorthodox approach to catching thieves. Maybe I should consider a second career in security consulting. But first, I had a newspaper to finish and a peaceful morning to enjoy. Because sometimes, after you've outmaneuvered the people who thought they were smarter than you, the best thing you can do is simply savor the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. Justice, as it turned out, really did sparkle. Looking back now, 6 months after what I've come to call the Great Glitter Incident, I realize that night changed more than just my relationship with my daughter. It changed how I see myself, how I approach problems, and most importantly, how I define what family really means. Sarah got the library job, by the way. She's been working there for 4 months now, and the transformation continues to amaze me. The nervous, uncertain woman who used to defer every decision to Marcus has been replaced by someone confident, independent, and genuinely happy. She's made friends with her coworkers, joined a book club, and even started dating again, though she's taking things very slowly this time. I'm learning to trust my own judgment, she told me over breakfast last week. For so long, I let Marcus make all the decisions because I thought that's what good wives did. But now I realize that good partners support each other's independence. They don't try to control it. The divorce was finalized 3 months ago. Marcus didn't contest a single thing, probably because his lawyer advised him that fighting would only expose more of his criminal behavior to scrutiny. The gambling debts turned out to be even worse than we'd initially thought. Nearly $60,000 spread across multiple creditors, including some very unsavory characters who were growing increasingly impatient. From what Sarah's lawyer discovered, Marcus had been running cons like this for years. We weren't his first victims, just his most recent ones. There was an elderly widow in Portland, whose life savings he'd drained 2 years earlier, a retired couple in Seattle who'd lost their home after Marcus convinced them to invest in his fake business opportunities. The man was a professional predator, moving from target to target, always one step ahead of his own debts and consequences, until he met a glitter bomb. The story of Marcus's spectacular failure spread through our neighborhood faster than gossip at a church social. Mrs. Patterson wasn't the only one who expressed interest in my security system. 3 other neighbors asked for advice on protecting their homes from smooth-talking thieves. I found myself becoming something of a local celebrity, the grandfather who'd outsmarted a professional con man with craft supplies and patience. But the real satisfaction came from watching Sarah rebuild her life on her own terms. She moved into a small apartment downtown 6 weeks ago, close enough to visit regularly, but far enough to establish her independence. The first time she signed a lease in her own name, paid her own deposit, and handed over keys that belonged only to her. She cried tears of pure joy. "I forgot what it felt like to make my own choices," she said that day, "to not have someone questioning every decision or making me feel guilty for wanting things." The legal aftermath of Marcus's attempted robbery was equally satisfying. While we chose not to press charges for the break-in itself, partly to avoid putting Sarah through the trauma of testifying against her ex-husband, Marcus's other victims weren't so forgiving. The widow in Portland had kept meticulous records, and when she learned about other victims, she contacted law enforcement. Marcus was arrested 4 months ago on multiple counts of fraud, theft, and elder abuse. His gambling debts had finally caught up with him too, and the people he owed weren't the type to accept payment plans or excuses. Last I heard, he was serving 18 months in county jail and would face federal charges when he got out. Sometimes I wonder if I should feel sorry for him. After all, addiction is a disease, and gambling addiction destroys lives just like any other dependency. But then I remember the casual cruelty in his voice when he called me a lonely old fool, the calculated way he planned to use Sarah's love as cover for his crimes, and my sympathy evaporates. Marcus had choices at every step. He could have asked for help instead of planning theft. He could have been honest with Sarah instead of manipulating her trust. He could have sought treatment for his gambling addiction instead of feeding it with other people's money. Instead, he chose deception, betrayal, and crime. The consequences were his own making. The house feels different now, in the best possible way. It's not just that the tension and hidden agendas are gone, though that's certainly part of it. It's that the house has become a home again, a place where people are welcome because they're genuinely wanted, not because they're running some long-term con. Sarah visits twice a week for dinner, and we've fallen into a comfortable routine that feels nothing like the strained family dynamics from Marcus's time here. We cook together, share stories about our days, watch old movies that make us both laugh. Real conversations between people who actually care about each other, not performances designed to hide ulterior motives. She's even started bringing friends around occasionally. Last month, she introduced me to David, a fellow librarian who shares her love of mystery novels and terrible puns. He seems genuinely nice, respectful, interested in getting to know me as Sarah's father rather than sizing up my financial situation. "How can you tell he's different from Marcus?" I asked Sarah after David's first visit. "He asks about me, not about you," she replied immediately. "Marcus was always more interested in your routines, your possessions, your vulnerabilities. David wants to know about my job, my interests, my plans for the future. He sees me as a person, not as a means to an end." It's a simple distinction, but a profound one. The people who belong in your life are the ones who value you for who you are, not what you can provide them. I've started volunteering at the senior center downtown, teaching basic financial literacy classes. It turns out that 30 years of insurance investigation gave me a unique perspective on how scammers operate, and there's a real need for education about protecting yourself from financial predators. My first class had 12 attendees. Word of mouth brought that number to 25, then 40. Now I'm teaching 3 sessions a week, covering everything from recognizing common scams to setting up basic security measures for your home and finances. The questions people ask break my heart sometimes. How do I know if my grandson is really in jail in Mexico and needs bail money? Is it normal for a financial advisor to ask for my bank passwords? My new boyfriend wants to borrow money for a business opportunity, but something feels wrong. These are good people, trusting people who've worked hard their entire lives and just want to enjoy their retirement in peace. They don't deserve to be targeted by predators like Marcus, and if my classes can help even one person avoid that nightmare, then something positive came out of our terrible experience. The glitter bomb has become something of a legend in these classes. I tell the story as an example of how sometimes the best defense is turning a criminal's own overconfidence against them. The students love it, especially the part where Marcus tried to explain why he was covered in craft supplies at 1 a.m. The key, I always explain, isn't being paranoid or suspicious of everyone. It's learning to recognize the difference between normal human behavior and predatory behavior. Real family members don't case your house like they're planning a heist. Real friends don't ask detailed questions about your banking habits. Real partners don't disappear for mysterious phone calls every night. One of my regular students, a 78-year-old widow named Helen, approached me after class last week with tears in her eyes. "I think my nephew has been stealing from me," she whispered. "Small amounts from my purse, but it's been going on for months. I kept telling myself I was imagining things, that family wouldn't do that." We talked for an hour after class. Helen's nephew had been using classic manipulation tactics, gaslighting her into doubting her own memory and perceptions while systematically stealing cash every time he visited. By the time we finished talking, she had a plan for protecting herself and gathering evidence. 2 days later, she caught him red-handed with a hidden camera she'd installed in her living room. Unlike Marcus, her nephew confessed immediately when confronted with video evidence of his theft. He's now in counseling for drug addiction and paying back every penny he stole with interest. "You saved my life," Helen told me. "Not just my money, but my sanity. I was starting to think I was losing my mind." Stories like Helen's remind me why the glitter bomb was necessary. It wasn't about revenge or humiliation, though Marcus certainly deserved both. It was about creating undeniable proof that would protect Sarah from further manipulation and show her the truth about the man she'd married. Sometimes people ask me if I have any regrets about how I handled the situation. Would I have done anything differently if I could go back and change things? The answer is no, absolutely not. I could have confronted Marcus the moment I suspected he was lying about his job loss. I could have thrown him out of my house the first time I caught him going through my belongings. I could have called the police the night I recorded his confession, but none of those approaches would have protected Sarah from the psychological damage of Marcus's manipulation. She needed to see and hear the evidence herself, needed to make her own decision about her marriage based on facts rather than my suspicions. The glitter bomb gave her that opportunity. It created a moment of perfect clarity where Marcus's lies became impossible to maintain, where his true nature was revealed so dramatically that even he couldn't spin it into something else. And yes, it was deeply satisfying to watch him try. These days, my house is secure in ways that have nothing to do with locks or alarms. It's protected by honesty, by genuine relationships, by the knowledge that the people who enter my home actually want to be here. Sarah has her spare key back now, the one Marcus never returned when he left that night. She uses it maybe once a week, usually to surprise me with groceries or to borrow a book from my library. Normal family interactions, the kind that don't require hidden agendas or careful planning. Last Sunday, she let herself in while I was napping and left a plate of homemade cookies on my kitchen counter with a note. "Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like. Love, your grateful daughter." I kept that note. It's taped to my refrigerator next to a photo of Sarah at her library job, smiling genuinely for the first time in years. That's what victory looks like. Not the spectacular failure of Marcus's glitter-covered theft attempt, though that was certainly memorable. Real victory is watching someone you love rediscover their own worth, their own strength, their own ability to build a life based on truth instead of lies. It's Sarah laughing at terrible jokes with David over dinner. It's Helen catching her thieving nephew and getting her money back. It's a house full of senior citizens learning to protect themselves from predators who see kindness as weakness. It's the knowledge that sometimes, when bad people think they've found the perfect victim, they've actually found someone who's been preparing for them their whole life. Marcus thought he was robbing a helpless old man. Instead, he walked into a trap set by someone who'd spent 30 years studying exactly how criminals think and operate. He brought manipulation to a fight where his opponent had facts, patience, and a really good understanding of human psychology. And glitter. Never underestimate the power of glitter. The best part about this whole experience isn't that I outsmarted a con man, though I'm certainly proud of that. It's that I learned something important about myself at 66 years old. I learned that retirement doesn't mean becoming a target, that living alone doesn't mean being helpless, that age brings wisdom, experience, and resources that young predators can't even imagine. Marcus saw an elderly widower and assumed he'd found easy prey. What he actually found was a man with decades of professional experience in catching liars, a lifetime of accumulated knowledge about human nature, and absolutely no patience for people who prey on others' kindness. He thought he was hunting. He never realized he'd become the hunted until it was far too late. So here's my advice for anyone dealing with similar situations. Trust your instincts. Document everything. Be patient. And remember that the best traps are the ones criminals build for themselves. Sometimes they just need a little help with the glitter. Thank you for watching, and remember to hit that subscribe button if you enjoyed hearing how one old man turned a robbery attempt into the world's most spectacular failure. Drop a comment letting me know your thoughts on Marcus's glittery comeuppance, and I'll see you in the next video. Justice, as it turns out, really does sparkle.